Because I'm a madman, I'm starting this video with 3 minutes left in the Vikings-Lions game, and the Lions are only up 22 points, so it's really anybody's game. But I'm gonna assume that they win, and with that out of the way, the only other thing I have to tell you is that if you want greater analysis on any of these games, subscribe to the channel because I'll be breaking down all of the playoff games. And with that said, let's get started with the AFC. The first one is a free space bingo type of deal. You pick the Bills, and you are correct. The Broncos are a good team, but they're not anywhere close to the Bills yet. Josh Allen is much better than Bo Nix, and the supporting cast for the Bills is much better as well. So I think this is a pretty easy one. The next one, there's at least some legs to, as it's hard to beat an interdivision opponent in the playoffs just because they know the ins and outs of your team better than anybody else will. So, with that said, the Ravens are still the pick. The Steelers are on a major downturn for the season, and they just cannot get out of their own way. With that said, the Ravens are hitting their stride. They have the best backfield in the league. I might be missing somebody obvious, but I would say King Henry and Lamar is the best backfield. And in my opinion, it's not particularly close. So, with that said, the Ravens have a lot going for them on offense. Defensively, they're starting to hit their stride as well. It's a good thing going in Baltimore. The first upset, which really isn't much of an upset, is going to be the Chargers against the Texans. I think a lot of people will be taking the Chargers over the Texans because the Texans aren't very good and the Chargers are pretty all right. So you add that together, and that's how you get an upset. I also think that when you look at the quarterback matchup, it is so severely in favor of the Chargers, with Justin Herbert being a elite caliber of quarterback, and CJ Stroud is just having a down year this year. So it's really hard to see a world in which the Texans win. I don't know if you should go with the AFC all the way through or if you should switch it up. I'm going to switch it up and go round by round instead of just conference by conference. So this next game is a bit of a doozy. I actually have to think about it. I don't like that. The Eagles and the Packers. It seems like a slam dunk that the Eagles will win because they're the 2 seed going against the 7 seed. But the Packers are mainly the 7 seed because they are in the best division in football. They are still a very good team with arguably the quarterback advantage. I don't think I would go that far, but there's a real argument behind it to say that Love is a little bit better than Jalen Hurts. I'm a pretty big Jalen Hurts guy. I'm not like absurdly into him, but I like him more than the average person does. I think he's a tremendously talented quarterback that is more than just the gimmick of being the sneak god. So, with all of that rambling out of the way, I'm picking the Eagles because I am a scared little child that will always go with the easy pick. And I also think there's an argument to be made that the Eagles are better. That's secondary, but whatever. The Eagles, they have an offensive line that will dominate the Packers' defensive line, and they have the corner depth to match up with the receiver depth that the Packers have. So they're going to have some pretty clear advantages. They're going to neutralize the advantages of the Packers. So for that reason, I like the Eagles. Them being at home doesn't hurt as well. This next one is a direct contradiction to me saying that I'm a scared little child, as I'm going with the Commanders. I think that they are logically the underdog. There is usually a learning curve for young quarterbacks, especially in the playoffs. But with that said, I think that Jaden Daniels, I almost called him Jalen. I stopped myself though. Jaden Daniels is so freaking good. He might just be the best rookie quarterback of all time, and I don't say that lightly whatsoever. He is that good, and he revived a lifeless franchise. So I don't see why the playoffs would be the spot that gets him tripped up entirely, especially because the Bucks don't really have a good defense. They can stress you out with blitzing a lot, but that's about it. I don't think they have tremendous talent. They have scattered talent, I would say, with some good corners here and there, and Levante David being a good linebacker, Yaya Diaby and Vita Vea, good defensive linemen. But then there's just lots of holes, and for that reason, I think that the Commanders can pull this off. Also, Marshawn Lattimore is Mike Evans' dad, literally, not figuratively, literally. So I think that he stands a chance to shut down the Bucks offense basically by himself, assuming he does play. The next one is an interesting matchup because the Vikings, I assume, are going to be reasonable favorites. I almost said heavy favorites. They're not going to be heavy favorites, but I think they're going to be favored over the Rams. So this is not a hot take, really. I think the Vikings are going to beat the Rams. The Vikings are coming off I would say, 99% chance of a loss against the Lions, and in which case it's an ugly loss as well. But they are a very good team. They have one of the best combinations of offense and defense balance in the entire league, which is weird to say because they're the fifth seed in the NFC. They can't be that good, right? No, they are. They're really, really good. They should be, just off the top of my head, I think the third seed in the league. You have the Chiefs, you have the Lions, and then I think it's the Vikings for best records. But the Rams, they have some life to them. Puka Nakua and Cooper Kupp are about as good as it gets for a wide receiver duo. And the Vikings will leave their corners in islands. So that can be stressed out a bit by the Rams. But I just think Justin Jefferson, there's nobody to match him. And defensively, the Vikings should make things difficult for Stafford because Brian Flores is a total gangster. For this next matchup, this is a bit of a spicy one. So I'm going to delay making my pick and try to fill the air with some dialogue. All right, I think I've deliberated on it long enough, and I think I'm going to be a wuss and go with the Chiefs. It's just hard to argue against Patrick Mahomes and a reasonably good defense. I think it's very dramatically overrated how good their defense is because they stand a chance to be very good in the playoffs because they always have that potential to flip the switch. But with that said, they have not shown to be particularly good in this entire season. And I don't know why we just assume that it's going to happen. So that's why I'm, a little bit iffy. The Chargers have also competed both times against the Chiefs. So that makes it a bit harder to figure out. And with all that said, I think that the Chargers are pretty well constructed. to handle the Chiefs from the standpoint that they have great tackles, offensive tackles, that is, that are able to force Chris Jones on the inside, where, yes, the Chargers do have a weak interior offensive line, but if you're going to double team Chris Jones on every single play and maybe get a back involved every now and again as well, because you can leave your tackles on islands, that makes it a bit harder for Jones to just dominate the game. So for that reason, I think that the Chargers really do stand a chance to have a successful offense. They can run the ball well, but I've talked a lot about the Chargers. Let me talk about the Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes, also Patrick Mahomes. In addition to him, they also have Patrick Mahomes. I'm kidding a little bit. They have some receiver talent now with Hollywood Brown back. I think that that's a major addition in all actuality. Travis Kelce is also liable to flip the switch. So, with all of that said, it is a potentially really good thing for the Chiefs. And if nothing else, they are a good team because they won, 16 games, 15 games? 15 games they won. So, math can be difficult, folks. Anyways, the next game is a total barn burner. I wouldn't be surprised if this doesn't have a spread of like Bills minus 2.5, Bills minus 3, something like that. I think that the Chiefs are going to be favored a bit against the Chargers, maybe like 4 points. So you know that they are the better team and there is like a clear consensus. But in this case, the Ravens and the Bills is a total slugfest. Ultimately, I'm going to give you my pick and then I'm going to give you my rationale. I'm going with the Ravens. It is so difficult to pick this game. Like, I'm basically flipping a coin. I just think that quarterback wise, you can't go with that one really. Lamar, I would say, had the better season this year, but I trust Allen just a little bit more in the playoffs. So that cancels out. Then receiver wise, that's also pretty close. They have different distributions of talent. I would say the Ravens have a better offensive line, and I think defensively I like their ceiling a bit more. So for that reason, or those reasons, I'm going to go with the Ravens. This game is very close. It might be the toughest game for me to predict out of any of the games, and it's not even the Super Bowl, so that's kind of funny. Switching now to the NFC, I talked a lot about the Commanders in a high way, but I think that the Lions are going to beat them. The Lions are just an absolute buzzsaw. They proved that tremendously against the Vikings tonight, as the Lions just gave them the business, and the Vikings are a really good team. I've said that probably 3 times now. Maybe actually just twice. Let's exaggerate though. The Lions, they have one of the, I'd say, 3 best at a minimum offenses in the league. Probably one of the 2 best, really, though, between them and the Ravens. They have basically everything you would want. With that out of the way, this next one is pulling at my heart in such a tremendous fashion because I really like both of these teams. I think the better team is the Eagles, so I think I should ride with that. The Eagles, they have basically everything you would want. They might be the most balanced team. I know I said before that the Vikings are amongst the most balanced, but I think that the Eagles are even more evenly distributed. I think that this is really going to be a good game. Maybe the game of the playoffs if the Bills and Ravens is not. But I could also see the next round, either of these two games being the game of the playoffs. This is shaping out to be a very nice playoffs. This next one, I'm going to get a lot of flack for. You could perceive that in either direction. For the Chiefs, they stand the chance to win because they obviously have a great quarterback situation. They have a really good interior offensive line that can present problems for any team. They have maybe the best coach in the league in Andy Reid. And the Ravens, they have just an absolutely electric offense that is backed by a up and coming defense as well. They are my pick. The Ravens, I think, genuinely are the better team. The Chiefs, been there, done that. Absolute gladiators in Kansas City. The Ravens, they've struggled in the playoffs relative to their regular season success. So, with that said, there is that really logical argument for the Chiefs, but I think that the Ravens currently have the better quarterback, even though Mahomes is probably better than Jackson in the general sense. But you got to go with what's popping now, and Lamar is certainly popping. In addition to that, I think the Ravens' interior defensive line can match up well against the Chiefs' interior offensive line. So for those reasons, I'm going with the Ravens. Next, we got a good one over here as well. It is such an interesting matchup because in some ways they're mirror images of each other. In others, they are so drastically different. Offensive lines for both teams, fantastic. Arguably two of the three best offensive lines in the league right there. Then you might be wondering, why did he say two of the three? The Broncos are also, I would say, a top three offensive line. They don't get talked about like that. Oh man, also the Packers. It's hard. The Bucks are in that conversation, sort of. I wouldn't maybe go that far with the Bucks, but they're definitely close. I'm rambling. Either way, great offensive lines, quarterbacks that are like point guards to some degree, where they're just, passing to the open guy and letting the game come to them. But Hurts is more of a, I'm going to go out there and do it myself type of guy. So they're a little bit different in that regard. The way they are absolutely different, the Lions are blitzing every play dang near, and the Eagles are a Vic Fangio never blitz. Not never blitz, but rarely blitz relative to what the Lions are doing for sure. With all this said, I like the Eagles. I feel so lame for it, but the Lions are just so beat up. Their pass rush is harmed by it. Their run defense is harmed by it. Their coverage is not really great. And I think that A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith could really present some problems. So I like the Eagles here. You got Saquon Barkley, too. I can't go without mentioning him. They got a great defense. There's a lot to like for the Eagles. Then this one, the Super Bowl, a battle for flight supremacy. Which bird is cooler than the other bird? I think there's a correct answer to that, but it's not relevant actually to which team is going to win, so I'll be silent on that. Comment in the comment section which bird you think is more dominant. Anyways, this game is everything you want in a Super Bowl. You got the two best quarterbacks arguably in their conferences. Yeah, I questioned myself really hard for a second. I was like, is Jalen Hurts arguably? He's definitely arguably. I don't know if I would say that it's Jalen Hurts. Jared Goff really got a good claim to it. That's the main one that comes to mind. Unless you want to get nutty and say Jaden Daniels already in that conversation. Lamar, I don't need to defend Lamar to you. What the heck is Lamar? Anyways, this game is incredible. I would love for this to be the real Super Bowl. Such good coaches, even though Nick Sirianni is oftentimes ostracized. He is so aggressive. I love it. Both on his play decision, like going for fourth, and also like trying to get after his own fans. That's a real man right there. You love to see it. John Harbaugh, I think a little bit underrated. Really smart. Really good at getting the right coordinators, except for Greg Roman. I don't know what that was about. Anyways, this game is tremendous for so many reasons. The offensive line, I'm going to go into a little bit of detail with this one, just because it's the Super Bowl. It's the SEC, it means more. The Super Bowl would, I would say, favor the Eagles from the standpoint that they have the better trench play. So that is one thing. But the quarterback, that favors the Ravens. I like the offensive line a lot more for the Eagles, though, than I do for the Ravens. I like the defensive line for the Eagles a little bit more than I do for the Ravens. Not a lot, a little bit. I like the coverage unit for the corners for the Eagles more, but I like the coverage unit for the defensive backs for the Ravens as a whole a little bit more. Linebacker-wise, I like the Eagles more. I don't know if that's a hot take. I think it's just factually correct. Jeez, this is tough. The receivers, I think, are, I would say, actually the Ravens. Zay Flowers is not as good as A.J. Brown. This would be a case where Devonta Smith is definitely the clear number 2. And the tight ends, though, I like for the Ravens a bit more. Running back, that's brutal. That's a brutal question. I could go either way, for sure. I think it depends on what your team needs. I think Saquon has played better, but I think that Henry is just as good. So that's not really anything then at that point. This is just a tie. With all of that said, I think I have to go with the Ravens. And it is so difficult. I would be 51% legitimately behind the Ravens, just based on what I know right now. They have such a slight advantage in the areas in which they're more advantageous, aside from quarterback, because I think there is a moderate difference between Lamar and of course Jalen Hurts, but that is it. That's the only real difference, but that's enough for me. Those are my thoughts on the NFL playoffs. Be sure to let me know what yours are in the comment section, and also be sure to like and subscribe for more content.